Eddie Van Halen revolutionized the guitar, inspired millions, and redefined rock itself. Yet, behind that infectious grin and those mind-bending solos lay rivalries few ever knew about. There were 6 guitarists he admired, competed with, and, at times, simply couldn't stand. What drove this hidden tension between legends? Welcome to Royal Time of Hollywood. Today, we're counting down the 6 guitarists who ended up on Eddie's secret hate list. Number 6 is Eric Clapton. Before Eruption, a teenage Eddie Van Halen sat in his Pasadena bedroom, dropping the needle on Cream Records. Eric Clapton was his god. Eddie learned every lick of Crossroads note for note. But by the late 1970s, the student had surpassed the master. When Eddie's two-handed tapping and dive bombs redefined the instrument, the old guard grew skeptical. In 1980, Clapton was asked about Van Halen. His response? "He's very good technically, but I don't hear much soul." It crushed Eddie. To hear his hero dismiss his innovation as mechanical was heartbreaking. When they finally met in mid-80s, Clapton was polite but distant. Eddie later told a friend, "I think I loved the myth more than the person." While Eddie eventually made peace with it, the sting of being rejected by the man who started his fire never truly vanished. Number 5 is Ritchie Blackmore. For Eddie, Deep Purple's Ritchie Blackmore was a prophet of tone. But the dream of meeting his idol soured quickly. In a 1982 interview, Eddie recalled their first encounter. "He just stared at me. Wouldn't say hi, nothing. I was crushed." Blackmore, famously moody, later offered a backhanded compliment. "He's a fine player, but I think he plays too many notes." It was a generational standoff, Blackmore's classical restraint versus Eddie's fluid freedom. Eddie felt the shaft from Blackmore's eyes, sensing a veteran musician who felt threatened by the new kid on the block. Though Blackmore eventually acknowledged Eddie's brilliance decades later, the cold shoulder from the dark wizard of the Stratocaster was a bitter pill for the young Van Halen. Number 4 is Joe Perry. In 1978, Van Halen was the thunderstorm rolling across the rock skyline. But as they toured, Eddie felt a cold indifference from Aerosmith's Joe Perry. "People like Joe Perry would just give me the shaft with their eyes," Eddie recalled. "Wouldn't be nice. No nothing." Eddie believed Perry saw him as a threat to the established order. While Perry's style was built on 70s sleaze and riffs, Eddie was lightning in stereo. It wasn't until 2013, decades later, that Perry finally admitted he was blown away by Eddie's debut. For Eddie, the eventual respect was welcome, but it couldn't erase the years of being treated like an unwelcome outsider by a man he once looked up to. Number 3 is Tom Scholz. The tension with Boston's Tom Scholz was less about the shaft and more about identity. During a show where both bands shared a bill, Eddie finished a raw, fiery solo, only to watch Scholz step up and play the exact same solo. "I was standing on stage, and the whole crowd was looking at me like, 'What's this guy doing?'" Eddie recalled. To Eddie, Scholz was an MIT-trained engineer who calibrated music with science, while Eddie played with instinct. Scholz's aloofness backstage and his perceived duplication of Eddie's style led to a silent feud. To Eddie, originality was sacred. Seeing someone trace his shadow felt like a personal violation of his craft. Number 2 is Rick Derringer. In 1978, veteran Rick Derringer opened for Van Halen. After the show, Eddie confronted him. "Hey, Rick, I don't care if you use the technique. Don't play my melody." Derringer hadn't just used tapping. He had copied Eddie's solos note for note. The next night, Derringer did it again, even closing his set with "You Really Got Me," Van Halen's current hit. Eddie's patience snapped. "If you're going to keep doing that, you ain't opening for us." Derringer was kicked off the tour. For Eddie, it wasn't about ego, it was about survival. He had blown up amps and sawed guitars apart to find his brown sound, and he wasn't about to let a peer steal the soul behind the notes. Number 1 is Randy Rhoads. The most legendary rivalry was with the only man who could truly challenge Eddie's throne, Randy Rhoads. Both were young, both were revolutionizing the guitar, and the media compared them endlessly. Eddie's public comments were sharp. He was honest, anyway. Because he said everything he did, He learned from me. It was a defensive move to reclaim authorship of the movement. Ozzy Osbourne later claimed that Rhodes didn't have a nice thing to say about Eddie. There is even a story that Rhodes tech-taped a photo of Eddie to the bottom of Randy's wall pedals so Randy could stomp on him every night. It was a cold war of guitar gods. Tragically, Rhodes' death in 1982 froze this rivalry in time. Eddie's feelings were a complex mix of wounded pride and the realization that Rhodes was the only one who truly reflected his own brilliance back at him. Eddie Van Halen eventually learned that being the best meant being a target. He faced imitators, rivals, and heroes who broke his heart, but through it all, he never lost his spirit. As he once said, "You can copy the licks, but not the spirit." If you enjoyed this deep dive into rock history, make sure to like this video, subscribe to Royal Time of Hollywood, and hit that bell notification